Now, I'd like to introduce, in place of Miss Joho, who couldn't speak today because she's sick, we're very, very lucky to have with us, I think, this is so interesting, Fan Bai, who's going to talk about his film. Well, we're going to watch a short clip of his documentary, Talk of Home, and also talk a bit about the kind of broader work that he does, which is to kind of facilitate cultural exchange between the British Chinese community here and China and the broader communities in both countries. And he's doing lots and lots of interesting work around the mayoral elections and around the Olympics and you know, just and the other thing, his film really brings us up to date if you think about this day as some sort of historical progression with huge jumps in between. But we've looked at the very beginning of the 20th century and representations of the boxers and early film footage. Then we've looked at the 1980s and that kind of brief, hopeful flowering of interest in the British Chinese community, which we'll come back to in the next session. But this brings us up to now, and it's very, you know, interesting to see what advances and leaps and bounds have been made, not just because of events here, obviously, but because of global events and the way that the world is now. So, over to you, Fan Bai, and just say some words and then we'll watch your film.
Hi everyone, my name is Fan Bai. I'm from mainland China, studied BA and MA in London, Goldsmiths College, and joined CCTV and Hong Kong Chinese channel for a period of time for cameraman and editor freelance, and worked a series documentary called Biggest Chinese Restaurant for BBC 412. Then I filled a tiny small gap market. It was 4.5 years ago. Then I founded the company called C Cubed Media, started to providing news and various video content for Chinese media and also BBC World Service. And by moving on, we might introduce slightly later what we are doing, but we spotted this opportunity in terms of 2010 British general election. It was at that time 8 British Chinese stood up and ran for the parliament member. It was very, I don't know whether it's a small or big in the mainstream society, but obviously it's a huge event in the Chinese community. Everybody was talking about and everybody is discuss about it. And I thought no matter whether it's too political in terms of lots of filmmakers question about it, but our story started from that spot. We're using this opportunity to illustrate the whole history in terms of the Chinese community in Britain. How does it from seaman takeaway shop, and we try to unveil the curtain of the Chinese community to the mainstream society to tell people what the Chinese people in this country actually does more than a takeaway, what we do at the moment and what we hope we can do in the future. So we can see the very short trailer, and we had a premiere in BAFTA in January. I can tell a bit more later on.
Okay.
My parents have always said, and many people say, well, the Chinese are overseas are actually bananas. Sort of yellow on the outside but actually white inside. But actually my argument is completely the opposite. We are actually much more Chinese than the Chinese. People often say that the Chinese community is often seen but seldom heard.
The Chinese community in Britain represents some 600,000 people. It is the third largest ethnic minority within the UK.
I am very traditional work. I'm running a Chinese takeaway. I've been engaging since my first day start to work, 16 years old, until today.
If one was interested in China's future, of course one looks at immigration as one of its most important products.
In 2005, I became British, and that's when I decided it was about time to make Britain my future, the future for my family. So I became naturalized.
If I want to do anything, I will put my full commitment to it, to do my best. That's how I do things.
people have the right to choose the place where they like to live. This is not my idea now. And the whole world is a global as a whole.
There's a generation of young ethnic people in Britain, not just Chinese, all sorts, who have stretched the idea of Britishness much further. The idea of Britishness is perhaps more cosmopolitan, more internationalist, more interesting, because it's a creative process. They're starting from nowhere. They're creating these identities out of bits and pieces of what they know from their parents, from their own experience, from their life in Britain. They're creating new identities.
There.
Right.
So that's exciting, isn't it? I think.
The whole film is, we finished last December, 58 minutes was did as the standard as the BBC length. We're in a talk with BBC and Channel 4 at the moment. We hope, I think the aim of the film is make it mainly, and I think not only, but mainly for the British mainstream audience. We hope they can see what does really Chinese people do here. It's a documentary. Where should I start my story? Because it's really long and it took me it really took 2 years to do, and then asked me when did I do the research. I say we didn't really have the time to prepare before we had an idea January, and obviously I'm from mainland. I had I thought I need to talk to the Chinese community people. I would say whether we should do this or not. Then obviously,
here in Britain.
Yeah, here in Britain. Then once I did a week or something like that research, I realized the Chinese community is not the original Chinese community anymore. It's being affected by so much by the mainland China nowadays. Then I start to talk to the embassy, not asking their permission, but by asking, say, what their opinion to seem to the British Chinese community. Then I realized I have to go back to China to film something maybe. Then it all just took 2 weeks. Then we decided, anyway, let's start it with the general election. It's a bit late to start with anyway. So we just grouped the crew with David, the director, which did loads of documentary, David Dixon for BBC, and also he's doing feature film in Hollywood at the moment. We also is a British producer, 2 Australia guy, cameraman and sound recordist, and also did our music composer. So I was the only Chinese member in the crew at the end of the day, although it's purely a Chinese idea, and also my company is full of Chinese people as well. But the crew went very British actually. Then we just dived in, and it took us 2 years to finish the whole project. Had loads of arguments, and loads of, you can't imagine this. Is every time we go out we see something, and I need to introduce to the director what's the Chinese angle about it. And for example, in Chinatown, maybe some British, from a British angle point of view, is all Chinese food. But from my point of view, it was Hong Kong food to Cantonese food to start with. Now you got Sichuan food, you got Dongbei food, and you got Hunan food, cuisine, so many different things. The Chinatown actually is changing. The British Chinese community is changing. From one food point, you can do a whole documentary already. Then I need to explain to him about the whole story, started from zero, build up the whole story, tell him about the development. Then we can carry on the filming, because it's a lot of explanation, loads of things you can't just read through, from the books. So yeah, shall I turn this? I know we not got plenty of time. Shall I put this straight away into very slightly more interactive, that you guys can ask more questions? But one thing I can point out is, from my point of view, this documentary, I hope. I'm not 100% sure, because Anna Chen, which is did a radio show for BBC 4, was very much about the Chinese community, how it's getting on, from the first Chinese arrived in UK and then from until today. But probably we recognize this. Some of the people say it is the first documentary really talking about whole Chinese community history as well. But being the first or second is not important. But this one, interesting thing is I'm not British-born Chinese, and I came as a mainland Chinese student, and it allows me. The disadvantage is both for British Chinese community, also for British community. I mean, British as mainstream for me is all new, but it allows me as an advantage is I can step one step back forwards. It can view the both sides, and also able to point it out. Is a lot of, I have to say, to be very honest, and it's a fact, is a lot of affecting an impact from mainland China to the local community. So the whole film was a triangle relationship, and it was trying to unveil this fact for people, trying to understand. We're talking about British Chinese. Actually, we got so many. We got Malaysia Chinese, Vietnamese Chinese, and we got Hong Kong Chinese. We got mainland Chinese, and now mainland Chinese getting a bigger and bigger part. So this one able to tell us at the end of the day is not politics. Is let people to talk of their home. Where is their home and how they can contribute to their home in the future. Shall we start?
Yes,
we can discuss a little bit more.
We've got a few more minutes to take some questions, and I think that's so. Probably lots of you have listened to Anna Chen's show on Radio 4 that she did on the history of the community, and so this now is sort of looking at the Chinese community as it is impacted by our very different relations with China right now, and that's really interesting, I think, for the future. So, are there any questions for Fan? Rosa.
Bit of a selfish question, but who financed it? Did you have to self-finance, get it made, and then take it to the
Very good question.
And also, Lucy's looking for finance.
Right. First of all, you guys probably heard about it. It's a BC project being funded, British Chinese project, encourage people, British Chinese, to get their voice heard and speak loud to the mainstream community, and founded by Christine Lee Solicitor Company. She gave me the first funding to start with the project. Obviously, it was not a huge amount, but I have to say, beside the film project, obviously my company is running as a commercial company, and we got a lot of relationship with Chinese companies. So surprisingly, some of them are very supportive, and I hope they don't get a single penny back for this sponsorship, and I don't think they get much exposure out of it as well in terms of it's a documentary, and they all supported. At the end of the day, I got funded half of the documentary budget, then I funded myself putting in another half. In terms of I was just chat with, and the company does loads of things at the moment. It's very exciting. It's involving with mayor office and the mainstream British media. We take media, we do lots of training with the Chinese media and British training media, and also we do lots of we're representing mayor office and promoting London in China as well. We do lots of very marketing strategy and trying to providing media service in the gap market. In terms of, I think, besides the commercial stuff, really, this was historical. I think, no matter no funding, whatever, we just dived in. So the financial-wise is not a really wise or very successful story to hear, but that was the truth. Then just we funded the other half of it, but we got the other half. It's very lucky already. Yeah.
And you've got interest now that you've made it. You finding that people are interested in the story.
Yes, we had a very successful premiere in BAFTA. First of all, by the name of the VIP, the Chinese ambassador attends. Although we had lots of things, not a propaganda style, which is Chinese typical style. We said a lot of the fact in terms of what China's problem at the moment, and also in terms of what's the problem with Chinese people in here, and also how to relating each other, which surprisingly he attends, and he gave this a speech, and also stayed there, watched the whole film, and also the chairman of British Council, quite a lot of parliament members, some lords and ladies, they all went, and the key members of the Chinese community. So they all went for attention of it. They think it's a good thing to live with, no matter which they're going to show on the BBC or not. Is something worthwhile to doing it, and it's not easy because linking everybody together, and it's very hard. So they delighted to see, and they all went to watch it. So it was good. Yeah.
And did you say that you think that the BBC might commission something from this, even if
we did not choose the route to write the treatment to the BBC, try to get funded and everything. Obviously, this can be very complicated. Then the BBC commissioner emailed me last week. They figure out there's too much politician involved. Obviously, I say, true or not true, these are real British Chinese. These are just illustrations, illustrator in terms of saying what we're doing here. But obviously from the TV broadcasting side of angle, we are discussing how we can twist a little bit by not affecting the core body of the film. So I can see that once I met Jon Snow in Channel 4, and he said straight away, very interesting. First documentary, as in terms of his knowledge, every year, Chinese New Year, big things happen in Trafalgar Square. They doing a 10 minutes feature series or whatever, tell stories about Chinese community. But what's the real Chinese community? He says, I'd love to see.
Yeah.
So it's still, I think, is a huge potential here to do so. Yeah.
No other questions? Yes?
Well, I was going to ask the same question as was asked, but because I used to work in TV, I'm curious about, what the budget was, if you're willing to say. But also, I can understand what they mean about the problem of the politics, because it's now sort of 2 years out of date in television documentary terms, and people stay, they want to know about Britain in Chinese community in 2012, not 2010. So it's really hard making a film. It looks beautiful, but really hard making a film outside of the broadcast system, and then trying to place it retrospectively. You're always on a loss when you do that.
I suppose in terms of the history of the British Chinese community, it's historically now significant. Maybe it was contemporary at the moment, but even now it has its place in the tale, doesn't it?
Of course, yeah. I have to say the budget wasn't. We have thousands of ways to control and tight the budget. Obviously, we could just use the Chinese media footage about China, but obviously we went there with the whole British crew, and it was over. I have to say, is not exactly a number. I didn't calculate that exactly, but it's over £100,000 for the whole documentary to be finished, and less than 150. I have to say. And so it was between that sort of that range, and also I could use the Chinese crew here, can spend a lot less, but I luckily enough is the market for the Britain and China business went very well, so the company went very well and allows me to finance the documentary, putting a very from a personal angle, the documentary for the company itself obviously is it is an exposure. We're doing something obviously is good in terms of history. So a lot of people are supporting and recognize our contribution. So it made us able to do some projects relating to this core one as well.
So it's a reciprocal thing, isn't it? It's good PR for your company, and it's good for it's kind of self-financing in a way, So I just let the budget flow a little bit, so didn't control the budget very tight. Once the discussion and argument happens, that always the communication costs money, and Well, let's hope that you sell it to the BBC or sell the seeds of a new project that they'll do, and then it will get bigger, and then you can finance Lucy, who we're going to talk to next about one of her ongoing projects. But thank you so much for coming in and telling us about this, and we'll stay in touch over the next events that we have. So thank you to Fan Bai.